Hi, everyone, and welcome to a GMAT free prep hour with Manhattan Prep. It is so nice to virtually meet with all of you. I'm sure we've got some new faces here who have not attended in the past, as well as some folks that I am used to seeing pretty regularly. As you join, please let me know where you're joining from. This is one of my favorite parts of these sessions, as well as how long you have been studying. I am joining from Ann Arbor, Michigan, so I will kick us off with that information. It is quite cold here, at least it has been lately. There hasn't been a lot of snow though, which is disappointing. If you're gonna have the cold, you should at least have snow, and then you can get outside and do some outdoor snow time activities, right? I like to do some downhill skiing, but can't do a whole lot, there's only ice. All right, so as you join, where are you located? Where are you joining from? And how long have you been studying? And we will kick off tonight's session, which is going to be super exciting. It's something that I've been talking with a lot of my current students about pretty regularly. You can all type into chat, by the way. Yep, there we go. Montreal and just started GMAT. Awesome. This is a really good session to come to if you've just started. It's a great session to come to if you haven't just started as well. These free prep hours tend to be sessions that we design really for everyone because we're not exactly sure who's going to join, right? So we try to keep in mind the folks who are just getting started with their GMAT prep, but we also know that we see trends in individuals who have been studying for a while and maybe are struggling with their studying. And so I, for one, am always taking those people into account as well, thinking about what are the struggles and the challenges that you face when you've been studying for potentially quite a while. Excellent. What about everyone else here? We got a few folks. Where are you joining from? How long have you been studying? Oh, NYC, nice. Excellent, 3 months, okay. That's a good amount of time. I hope that at this point you feel like you're getting a handle on some things, right? You're starting to understand the GMAT, get used to what kind of a test it is, which is very unique, right? It is, if you're thinking about the GMAT like it is similar to other exams, then you probably need to take a step back and rethink about the GMAT. Oh my gosh, our first session of the year, and I've already gotten the date wrong because it's 2022. How many times have you guys done this? Come on, Tiff. All right, let's get started here with our content for tonight. Very quickly before we do, I always try to list our free options for studying. We offer courses as well and tutoring, obviously, but some people do put together their own study materials and study essentially without paying or with paying a minimal amount for books, etc. Our best free options are, of course, GMAT free prep hours. We also offer live GMAT classes. I have one coming up tomorrow night. We have a live free, or sorry, an on-demand free version of a course. And then also we offer Foundations of GMAT Math Workshop free now as well. This used to be part of our paid offering. So there are quite a few things that you can pull together that are free or low cost. I always say that it's personal opinion, right? It's what you need personally is how you should structure your GMAT prep. Excellent. What we're covering tonight is identifying your weaknesses. We're specifically using fractions, decimals, percents, and ratio problems, or IM, in order to highlight this. And when I say identifying your weaknesses, I'm really thinking about a few different areas. And those areas are content, process, and solution method. Now, I broke them down into those 3 areas because I have seen so consistently lately my students coming to me saying, I have a content problem. And it frequently shows up in fractions, decimals, percents, and ratios. And when I go and I look at their work and talk with them about what they're doing and where they're struggling, I start to uncover it's not really a content problem, it's something else. So regardless of where you're at and you're studying right now, this is a key skill, being able to look at a problem that you complete and truly say, what are you struggling with? What was your weakness? Why didn't you get it right? Or if you did get it right, but you took a little bit too long, why did it take too long for that particular problem? And a lot of people tend to go back to this idea of content. Oh, I didn't understand the content. Let me go back to my books, or let me go back to this resource and I'll read more about fractions and decimals and percents and ratios. When in fact, it might not have to do with your understanding of the content itself. It may have more to do with how you're approaching the problem, so your process, or the solution method that you chose to actually solve the problem. It's a fine distinction. It really is. So in order to illustrate this point, what we're going to do is be going through a series of several problems here. This is really the best way to go about looking at this particular topic, I think. What we're going to do is you'll attempt this problem. I'll give you 2 minutes for each. When you're working on your own as well, 2 minutes is ideal timing for a problem. Sometimes if you need a little bit more time, you can give yourself up to 3 minutes on problems just for a little bit of leeway. It's also safe to take up to 3 minutes on problems when you're taking the official exam as well. And I mention this because this is another theme that's been coming up recently with some of my students. They try to stick very closely to 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. Really what you're trying to do is balance, right? You have an average of 2 minutes per problem. If some of them are worth it and you want to invest a little bit more because you think that you can get them right, then you spend up to 3 minutes, but that means you have to find that time somewhere else. So it's all a balancing act with the GMAT. That's why taking CATs regularly is so important, because getting that sense of timing down throughout an entire section is really key. All right, so what we'll be doing is I'll give you 2 minutes for each problem, and then after the problem, we'll talk about what weaknesses, if any, you saw in your own particular work. All right, I hope everybody's ready. We're full steam ahead tonight. Excellent. So I'm going to set my timer for 2 minutes here. I'm going to go to the next slide with the problem, and then I will start it and I'll tell you when. It's a good idea if you set your timers as well, so that you can also watch and see how much time that you have left. Okay. Here is the problem, and I am starting your time right now. All right, that is 2 minutes. Goes by quickly. Excellent. In chat, can you please send me your answer choices? What did you come up with? And if you didn't come up with anything, if you couldn't reach an answer, then you can always put a question mark or an answer choice that you would guess with a question mark. On the GMAT, you always want to choose some answer choice, right? You don't want to ever leave a question blank. So your best guess can sometimes get you much closer than you think. Excellent. All right. Let's take a look at this problem. So this is a ratio problem. We talked about what we're discussing tonight in terms of content. It's FDPR, we call it, fractions, decimals, percents, and ratios. I like to start off with a nice ratio problem because, I don't know, it just felt right for this evening. Ratios can be fun sometimes. All right, I'm seeing some answer choices come in here. The first thing that you want to keep in mind is that you can represent ratios in many different ways. So traditionally, we would look at a ratio. We have ratio here. They nicely tell you what's going on, right? 1 part bleach for every 4 parts water. Now in chat, really quickly before I write it down, how would you write that? Just traditionally in ratio format. Yeah, absolutely. You guys got it. Totally. 1 to 4, just like that. This is the traditional way to write a ratio. And in this ratio, we're looking at bleach to water. I always like to label my ratios. On the GMAT, it can be very easy when you're thinking quickly and trying to move quickly to make just really simple mistakes, right? That don't need to be made. Labeling things, writing your work really neatly really, really helps to avoid those issues. All right, so taking a look at this, you also could write a ratio as if it were a fraction. And a ratio is a part-to-part relationship, right? So it's 1 part bleach to 1 part water. You also could sometimes write ratios as actual fractions, where it's like part to whole. Now I've changed this 4 water to a 5, because if we're looking at this as a whole, then this would be bleach plus water. Keeping this in mind is really important, because when we're thinking about fractions, decimals, percents, and ratios, all of those can be turned into one another, right? So a ratio can be represented as a fraction, could also really be represented as a decimal. If my fraction is 1/5, I could write that as 0.2 very easily. This in turn could be represented as a percentage, right? Ultimately, all of these represent some type of relationship. Typically, the GMAT is going to give you a very specific relationship, like saying it's a ratio. That's not always going to be the thing that's most helpful for you or the best way for you to go about a problem. So you want to keep that in mind as you go forward. In this case, I do kind of like, however, how they represent this as a ratio here. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that you really want to pay attention to the information that you're given. So I always start with the question. Before I read any information about the problem, I read the question because it gives me a lot of context. How much bleach did Akai put into the solution in milliliters? So I already know that I'm looking at a solution. There's some amount of bleach, and my answer choices represent milliliters of bleach. I'm already thinking that this probably has to do with mixtures, which in fact it does. And that there are probably going to be other things that are being mixed in. So just by reading the question first, I have so much context. It also reminds me to take a quick glance at the answer choices to make sure that I recognize any interesting patterns there. Here I'm seeing that they're all decently spread apart. I'm seeing several multiples of 3. A, C, and D are all multiples of 3, which is kind of interesting to me. I don't know what to do with that yet, so I'll do nothing. Just note it. All right, next I read the actual information. So a cleaning solution mixture calls for a ratio. Yep, 1 to 4, 1 part bleach for every 4 parts water. When mixing the solution, Akai made a mistake and mixed in half as much bleach as was required by the ratio. Now, I'm not sure how all of you went about this, but the way that I would think about this is keeping this in ratio terms because I think that that's the easiest for now. Keeping this as a 4 because the water was correct. And then turning this into a 0.5 because I put half as much here as I should have, half as much bleach. Now I don't really want to leave a decimal in a ratio. That's incredibly uncomfortable. So I'm then going to take my ratio, which is just a relationship, right? And I'm just going to multiply this whole thing by 2. That gives me an integer here for bleach, 1, and an 8 over here for water. So now I have 1 part to 8 parts. Hopefully at this point, some people, you're all seeing some patterns, right? Like what this might mean for an answer choice. Taking a look at this then, I know that I'm going to have a much smaller amount of bleach than water, right? So I already know probably that E is out because I only have 27 milliliters in total of solution. However, I can very easily figure out exactly how much bleach I do have, right? Because I know that I have 27 milliliters here. Looking at this, I have 1 part bleach and 8 parts water, which means my total parts are really 9, if you think about it, right? It's the same thing we did with this fraction up here, part over total. What's the total? 9. To get from this 9 to the 27 here, I have to work with what's called an unknown multiplier. If you don't know what that is, definitely go and read about it. But essentially, I need to multiply this total by something to get the actual number, right? In this case, I'm going to multiply by 3, and I know that because I know my actual number is 27. That's my actual total. Now that I know that, I can take this multiplier and say, okay, well, then I have to multiply everything by 3. So I would get 3 milliliters of bleach and 24 milliliters of water. And then I know my final answer here, which is A. Excellent. So I did see somebody else chimed in chat here with an answer. When we're thinking about this particular problem, this took a little bit longer to explain because I was talking to you obviously up front about ratios and what those mean. This can be a relatively quick problem if you follow a good process. By good process, I mean start with that question first, read the information slowly and carefully 1 time through, make sure you jot some notes down, and really then choose a plan to solve that helps you the best. If this isn't the way that you did it, but you did it in a way that works really well for you, then that is great. I'm not worried about that. The other thing that you want to consider is how much time it took you. If you took the whole 2 minutes and then you needed a little bit extra, you probably want to think, is there a faster way I could have thought about this? All right, so really quickly then, we will look at this in context of content, process, and solution method. First, I'll ask you content questions. So did you remember the basic rules of ratios in this case? So what you want to reflect on is, did you remember how ratios function? If you didn't remember when you were actually completing the problem, can you understand or remember the rules when you're not being timed? If you can remember them when you're untimed, but you struggle to remember them when you are timed, probably what's happening is that you're experiencing just some test-related anxiety. And instead of content, what you really want to work on is focusing on calming yourself, slowing your mind down a little bit, and thinking in a clearer fashion, right? Anxiety, man, it's very real, test-related anxiety. So that's something that you want to be aware of. And then, did you feel that you must have advanced knowledge to succeed? This last one here is a dead giveaway to me. When people come and say, I would have to know calculus in order to be able to do this problem. I think, you probably did not use a good process, or you chose a solution method that was too difficult. You want to look at content and think, do I understand the content, and review it later? If you think that you have to have calculus level knowledge in order to succeed on a quant problem, though, that's just not going to be the case. probably what's happening is that there is an easier way to solve that you missed. All right, process. Did you take time to fully understand all information in the problem? So like I did you start with reading the question first? Did you read slowly through the information? And then did you pause to consciously form a plan? So many people jump right into solving problems and don't stop for a second and think, what's the best way to do this? How could I approach this in a way that's going to save me time? And time is really all that you have on the GMAT. That is your biggest resource. It's your biggest resource, but it's also your most limited resource, right? Because you don't have a lot of it. And then solution method. However you chose to solve this previous problem, was it something that used creative thinking, or did you strictly address the content being tested? And when I say that, I often think of people seeing algebra in a problem and jumping into solving that problem using algebra. Not always the best way. That's why pausing and reflecting is often going to result in better outcomes. Are there any solution methods that would work better? When you are reviewing a problem after you've completed it, you want to try to solve it in different ways. You used one method that came to you in the moment. Is there anything else? This is your time to really give that another shot. And that can be really helpful, because if you see another problem similar to this one in the future, you've already tried multiple solution methods and you know what worked best for you. And then last question, did you work slowly and carefully to avoid mistakes? A lot of times I see people who get through an entire problem and they've done everything beautifully, but they don't label their work and they get the variables confused or something, and then end up choosing the wrong answer choice just for that reason. Excellent. So in chat, really quickly before we move on, out of these three categories, did you feel like one of them stood out as being the most difficult in this previous problem? Was it content, process, or solution method that you felt like gave you the most challenge or the greatest opportunity to improve in the future? You can actually just write C, P, or S if you'd like for shorthand. Yeah, I'm seeing one process planning answer. One content answer. Excellent. Looking at problems like this too, this is an easier problem, not an easy problem, but easier. You want to tackle those problems though, and you want to be effective in them. If you look at easier problems, they're setting the stage for the more difficult problems. So make sure that you do have really good process on those, because that helps you then to build up to tackle those medium difficulty problems and extremely difficult problems that will be coming in the future. Excellent. Well, let's do another problem. Why not? That's what we're here for. All right. You will have 2 minutes on this one as well. Actually, I'll give you 3 minutes on this one, just to see what you think about having a little bit of extra time. Yeah, woo! Absolutely, it's cause for celebration. You get a little extra time. Excellent. So 3 minutes on this next one. I would love for you to focus on using a process like we just talked about. Make sure that you read the question first. Make sure that you read the information slowly and really form a good plan about how to solve. All right, here's your problem. Your 3 minutes starts right now. All right, that is 3 minutes. How did 3 minutes feel versus 2 minutes? Probably had a little bit of extra time to slow down, feel a little more calm and relaxed, hopefully. You can give yourself that permission to give yourself a little bit more time, especially on practice problems, right? You do want to try some problems in 2 minutes just to make sure that you know what that feels like as well. But on the official exam, if you take 3 minutes for a problem, it just means that you need to make it up somewhere else. So it's always, like I said earlier, a balancing act. Excellent. Looking at this one, again, I would start with the question. Give yourself some context. How many participants, in a study maybe, in total, had at least one blue-eyed parent? See, what I love about reading the question is that without the context of all the information, we can pay more attention to the detail. We haven't gotten overwhelmed yet, right? So now I notice at least one blue-eyed parent. I'm thinking that there are going to be different groups of people and that this could be something that trips me up. I always write the question in my own words. Doesn't have to be clear for very long, right? It can just be short term. At least one BE parent, blue-eyed parent. Excellent. A total of 9,180 people participated in a research study. Boom, exactly what I expected to see. On the genetics of eye color. Cool. So there's a research study. Here are the participants. It's about eye color, which makes sense. Blue-eyed parent. Of the participants, 4/9 had parents with blue eyes, had two parents with blue eyes. 4/9 of 9,180 equals two parents. And of the remaining participants, 8/17 had one parent with blue eyes. So basically what I've done here is just taken a moment to jot down a couple of notes. If you do this on your quant problems, it's a great habit to get into, basically, right? You don't have to remember as much information, which is really positive. Your brain is not going to be a tool that you should use to remember a lot of things as you go throughout the GMAT. Now, looking at this, I've got some complicated looking fractions here. I've got this kind of complicated number. I've got some complicated looking numbers in the answer choices. However, I'm also noticing in my answer choices that there's a really pretty big range. E is 8,400. A is 780. Oof, that's huge. That's a big difference. Looking at these middle answer choices, they're all separated by about 2,000 people. Now in chat, do you recognize this trend? What does it look like you might be able to do in terms of a solution method based on what you're seeing in these answer choices? It is a particular strategy. Oh yeah, I'm seeing it. Estimate. You can totally estimate. I'm not taking 4/9 of 9,180. That sounds terrible. I don't want to do it. It's actually a good indicator. If you see something on the GMAT and think, ugh, that's so gross, I don't want to do that. Take a second and think, is there another way? Maybe I don't have to do that terrible thing. Ultimately, if I estimate this 4/9, I'm going to call this about 9,000. 4/9 of about 9,000 is just 4,000, right? So right away, at least one blue-eyed parent, well, it's not A or B because those numbers are too low. I've already got 4,000 people. Next, I've got this other category. 8/17 of the remainder have one parent with blue eyes. Now, what's the remainder? Well, I had 4,000 here and I estimated about 9,000 people. So I'm going to say this is 5,000. Now, 8/17 is also just a bad number. I don't want to work with that. That's not a great fraction. What can I say it is instead? For the purposes of estimating. Giving you all a moment to think about it. Write it in chat if you have something in mind. Yeah, absolutely. 8/16, it's about a half, right? That's a lot easier to work with. So 1/2 of 5,000, well, I can do that pretty quickly. That's 2,500. All right, so now I have my question. How many participants had at least one blue-eyed parent? Well, there are the people who had just one blue-eyed parent, and there are the people who had two blue-eyed parents. Both of those would fall into this category of at least one blue-eyed parent. So I would add both of those together. It's about 6,500. Man, that gets me really close to answer choice D. Feels like that has to be the correct answer, and it is. With a problem like this, you certainly can go through and calculate everything exactly. It's a waste of your time. Ultimately, if you can recognize the ability to estimate on a problem like this, then you can save a whole lot of time, and you're using that brain power in different ways. You're able to look at this problem and think to yourself, okay, so at least one blue-eyed parent, what does that mean? Okay, well, I could have one blue-eyed parent, or I could have two blue-eyed parents. You want to choose where you're placing your mental energy, basically. And doing minute, detailed calculations, not an awesome place to put your mental energy. A better place is thinking strategically, thinking about the bigger picture, making sure that you're noticing details like at least here that could result in big miscalculations, right? If I read this as one blue-eyed parent, I would have chosen B. That's very close, right? The GMAT almost always has an incorrect answer choice for a mistake that you're going to make like that, a detail that you missed. All right. Thinking then about the categories, these areas that we discussed previously, was it a content challenge that you faced on that previous problem, a process challenge, or a solution method challenge that you feel like you most significantly faced? And again, for content, did you remember the basic rules of fractions? This was basically a fractions related problem. You can write the words out if you like, or you can just put C, P, or S. Content, process, solution. Got one process. I truly am curious to know. And I also am curious because I see, again, as I said at the beginning, I see a lot of people say that they face content struggles, right? I am struggling with fractions, or I'm struggling with geometry. And often what I uncover when working with them more closely is that it's not all about the content. They understand the rules. They know how fractions work. They know how to, calculate the area of a circle. What they're missing is something about process or solution method that helps them to see patterns and connections. And the GMAT is all about these patterns. You want to see something about a problem that you recognize from past problems. They're not going to be exactly the same, but you'll see these patterns that arise over time. In the previous problem, for example, the fact that you had this complex number and then kind of complex fractions, right? 4/9, 8/17, especially, that's a fairly complex fraction in the sense that it's like not something nice. It's not 1/2, it's not 1/4. And they're different from one another, 4/9 and 8/17. All of this tells me that the GMAT likely wants me to get a little bit frustrated, a little bit overwhelmed with this, and try to do the calculations and get a little bit stuck on that. When I see things like that, I step back for a moment and I think, well, if that's what the GMAT wants me to do, then what should I actually do? All right, let's take a look at another problem. I'm going to give you 3 minutes on this one as well. It seems like that worked out nicely. Take a deep breath before you start. Clear your mind out a little bit. And on this one, again, I want you to read the question first. And I want you to really think about the process that you're following. So going through and reading information carefully, and then pausing to really consciously make a plan about how you think that you should solve this problem. Okay, here is the problem, and your time starts right now. All right, that's 3 minutes. Excellent. I'm seeing some answer choices come in. Yeah, please do tell me, send me an answer choice when you have one here. It's okay to be wrong. Absolutely okay. In fact, when you get answers incorrect and you're practicing for the GMAT, you tend to learn a lot more than when you get them correct. I think that people, when they get answers correct, tend to review them a lot less thoroughly. So the question itself doesn't really serve you as well. I like to say that because a lot of people, when they're doing their studying, are really, really focused on getting answers right, getting problems right. They're like, oh my gosh, I missed this one. I missed this one. Oh my gosh, I'm doing so badly. What do I do about this? What you do about it is really thoroughly review a problem, right? And don't worry about the fact that you missed it, because your goal when studying is to learn more things. So if you're missing problems, then really make sure that you're learning from them, right? Okay, so looking at this one, I'm going to read the question first. I'm going to start here in reading the question rather than the entire last sentence, because this is really where the question starts. And I know that because this is a question word and there is punctuation right here. I'm always looking for guides like that, right? To show me where to start reading, where to stop reading, etc. This is a skill in the quant section. This is also really a skill in the verbal section of the GMAT as well. What fraction of their, I'm assuming I'm going to learn this, who they are, what fraction of their combined monthly income will they donate? All right, and then I see in the answer choices a lot of fractions, which makes a ton of sense because I'm being asked about a fraction. So I know that I'm looking for a fraction of a combined monthly income, which they're going to donate. So they're going to donate, this is what I'm looking for, something they're going to donate over combined monthly income. When I get questions that ask about fractions, I really like to write what that fraction means in words like this. If I can do that, I find that I'm able to solve problems much more easily and really stay focused on my goal much more effectively. All right, Vimbai spends 3/8 of her monthly paycheck on rent and 1/4 on food. Cool. Her roommate Carrie, who earns twice as much as Vimbai, this is probably going to be important, spends 1/4 of her monthly paycheck on rent and 1/2 on food. If the two roommates decide to donate the remainder of their money to charity each month, what fraction will they donate? Okay, so basically they each have a proportion of their paychecks that they're spending on rent and food. And Carrie earns twice as much as Vimbai. So we need to figure out how much, what fraction do they have left over at the end of each month? And then combined, what are they donating? What fraction? I'm seeing 24ths in all of the answer choices, which is super interesting. I feel like that is a potential clue as to how to proceed here a little bit. In the actual question, I'm seeing 8ths, 4ths, and half. All right, so looking at the clues that we have at our disposal here, what do you think a good solution method might be? Putting it to the group. How did you go about solving this? Do you feel like you had a good solution method? And having thought about it a little bit more, is there another way that you would have tried? Yeah, I really like that one. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how you estimated? I'm curious about that. I've got smart numbers as an answer here and estimate as another answer. I would be inclined here to choose smart numbers personally. And the reason for doing that is because I'm seeing some really strong indicators that that's a good possibility, right? When you use smart numbers, you can only really use them in instances where there aren't real numbers ever given. In this problem, we have fractions in the answer choices, these aren't real numbers, they're relationships, right? How much, like what fraction of a total. It doesn't ever tell you a certain dollar amount, like $500. If we look at the question and the information that we're given, we're also never given dollar amounts for anything, right? So thinking about that, that's a classic sign that smart numbers are a good option. We also have this fact that Carrie earns twice as much as Vimbai. If that's going to be the case, then I know that the fractions, if I just start to try to manipulate them, are going to get a little bit confusing, right? If they were equal and they both earned the same amount as one another, then the fractions would be much easier to work with. All right, so looking at this, I'm seeing 24 over here. I'm seeing 8, 4 up here. 8 and 4 and 2 all go into 24. So I'm going to start there. So Vimbai, I'm going to say that she gets $24 per month. Carrie gets twice as much, so she would get 48. So this is income. And then we have this idea of like rent and food, basically, right? All right, Vimbai is 3/8 of monthly paycheck on rent. The way I think about this quickly in terms of mental math is to divide 24 by 8. That's 3, and then multiply by the top number. So this would be $9. If that does not resonate with you, what I just did, that's absolutely okay. However you go about this simple math right here, that is absolutely up to you. All right, and then food is 1/4. That one's a little bit easier to come up with. That's going to be $6. Carrie is 1/4 rent, half on food. This is going to be 12. This is going to be 24. All right, so then remainder is really what we're looking for, right? So here the total, I'll make a total line as well. Total here is 15. My remainder is 9. Total here is 36. My remainder is 12. All right, and then I know that I care about them together. They're investing the remainder, they're donating the remainder. So that's going to be, going back to my question here, 9 plus 12 over their combined monthly income, which is 72. I just did some quick mental math of these two. That is going to be 21 over 72. Those are both divisible by 3. And if I do that, I get 7 over 24, which is B. Excellent. What are your thoughts on this solution method, this process? I really am curious about this estimation approach as well, if you have any more thoughts about how you would go about that. You could get some rough numbers. Honestly, if you were going to be estimating, you could get some rough numbers and get pretty close, because these are somewhat roughly divided into like 3 categories here, right? 5/24 and 7/24 are really pretty close to one another. This is close to half, whereas these are closer to like 1/4. And then up here, 17 and 19 over 24, these are pretty close to each other as well. So you could get within these realms and be pretty close. One other thing that I'd like you to take away from this is the idea of evil twins. Have you all heard of evil twins on the GMAT quant problems? Not just quant, problem solving problems specifically. No, oh my gosh, I'm going to introduce you to some evil twins. It's going to be exciting. When looking at quant problems, I'll erase some of my notes here so you can see it more clearly. There are sometimes answer choices that are related to one another in some way, and usually they add up to some total amount. In this case, we have fractions. If I look at B and D, those fractions add up to 24 over 24, if I add them together. I also have A and E that do the same thing. If I add those together, they add up to 24 over 24. When thinking about evil twins, if you have fractions, there are usually evil twin pairs, or often evil twin pairs, I suppose, that will add up to 1. One of those evil twins is almost always the correct answer. So C does not have an evil twin here. I would rule C out. This is a really good guessing strategy. It's rare that there are going to be two pairs of evil twins like this rather than just one. So if you were just guessing, for instance, you ran out of time on a problem and you saw a pair of evil twins, guess one of those. Don't take time to solve the problem. You're running behind on time anyway. Guess one of the evil twins. And to your point in chat here, you could do some estimating, right? Because these evil twins, A and B, are so much smaller than D and E. If you can just get close to the right amount in terms of ballpark, is it a majority or a minority, then you can guess which evil twin is going to be correct. If there's just one pair. In this case, there are two pairs. So you can't quite get exact, but you could get down to two answer choices. All right. Again, we're turning back to our review process here and thinking about what is the thing that really was your hang up, right? What was your struggle? Yeah, Andy, fractions that add to one typically are going to be evil twins. It's not always going to be fractions either, right? Like sometimes there might be a problem that there's a total mentioned and the total is like 12 or something. And there might be answer choice A, B, C. It's like 2, 4, 5, 8, 9. In this case, if you're looking at this and you see that like the number 12 is very important in a problem, just like here where these fractions, 1 is going to be very important when you're thinking about fractions because that's a total, right? Then looking at the answer choices that I just made up here, 4 and 8 would add up to 12. So these would be potentially your evil twins, right? So it's not just with fractions, but we see it most commonly with fractions. And you're looking for those fractions to typically add up to 1. If not 1, then some other number that's very important in the problem. Excellent. So thinking about what you struggled with on that one, not even struggled necessarily, what posed the greatest challenge? Was it content, so the basic rules of fractions that you struggled with or had the greatest opportunities with? Or was it more about process or the solution method that you chose? Seeing one vote for process. There's no right answer here. I expect that many people struggle with process just because I see that very frequently in my class students and my tutoring students. But if it was truly content, then that's the answer. This is a really useful framework. If you have a second to take a screenshot of this and review problems in this manner, that's a really good idea because ultimately thinking through these possibilities is a really good idea. You don't want to get yourself into a place where you're saying content all of the time, right? Where you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so bad at fractions. It might not be that you're bad at fractions, or it might not be that you don't understand ratios. It might be that your process results in you missing crucial information, or you're choosing solution methods that just are not optimal. So that previous solution method we used was called SMART numbers. That is one that you definitely want to know about. If you have not practiced using SMART numbers or recognizing when you can use SMART numbers, make that a priority for yourself because you can tackle much more difficult problem-solving problems in the quant section if you're using SMART numbers. All right, let's do one more problem together before we go. So exciting. I'll give you 2 minutes on this one because we're running out of time here and because you've had 3 minutes on the last 2 problems. So practicing with 2 minutes is a good idea too. All right, here is your problem and your 2 minutes starts right now. Hi. That is the end of your 2 minutes. Goes by so quickly. Excellent. Okay, I'm seeing a couple of answer choices coming in. Please send me your answer choice if you have not already. This is a fun problem. I like this one because it's different than some of the others that we've looked at. It's a little bit different, right? All right. So taking a look at this one, I'm going to read the question first, as always. I really like to call that out, and I take a lot of opportunities to do so, honestly, in these free GMAT prep hours, because being a good GMAT test taker is about the skills that you build. I really firmly believe that. When I started studying for the GMAT, I was not scoring anywhere close to my final score, which was a 760. And ultimately, what got me to that final score was changing my behaviors, really analyzing carefully what I was doing well and what I was not doing well, and making sure that I changed what I was doing to match what needed to be done to be successful on the GMAT. And reading the question first is one of those behaviors that became really critical for me. All right, here I'm seeing some punctuation. I also see a question word up here though. So instead of starting here, I'm probably going to read this entire last sentence, as it seems to be all part of the question. When the water from bucket B is poured into bucket C, okay, so we're combining some water, bucket C will be filled to what fraction of its capacity? Bucket C equals question mark. This is probably the closest I need to get in terms of writing out the question. Sometimes, again, I would write out the fraction in this case. I think I'm okay doing this. Great, so let's take a look at the answer choices. I'm seeing fractions, which is good. That's what I expect. Does anybody see anything interesting about these fractions in particular? We just talked about an interesting thing previously. We got some evil twins going on. All right, taking a look at these answer choices, I'm noticing that B and E add up to 1, as do A and D. C does not, so very unlikely that the correct answer is C in this case. Probably going to be one of these sets of evil twins, or one of answer choice amongst these evil twins, rather. Okay, reading the information, bucket A has twice the capacity of bucket B. In looking at this, I'm already tempted to start drawing something. And that is a really, really good instinct on a problem like this. If you have something that's like buckets and capacity, or a number of like containers that you have to set out, it's a great idea to just take a moment and draw what that looks like, because it's a lot easier to think about it visually than to think about it theoretically. So bucket A has twice the capacity of bucket B. I'm just going to kind of denote it like this. I think I'm actually going to call B 10 as well and A 20, just because I want to assign some potential numbers to it. Bucket A has 1/3 the capacity of bucket C. Didn't quite leave myself enough room here to represent it 100% visually accurately, but that's totally okay. So if A is 1/3, then C is going to be 60. I don't have units here. It's okay. This can be liters or gallons or whatever you want it to be. Bucket B is full of water, and bucket C is half full of water. 1, 2, 3. So it's up to this line. When the water from bucket B is poured into bucket C. Okay, so now this really does turn into a fraction, right? B plus C over C total. Bucket C will be filled to what fraction of its capacity? So I'm sort of using this approach here where I'm drawing it out and using a visual approach, but also using smart numbers basically, right? I've just assigned these specific numbers so that I can add them together easily. Well, B is at 10 and it's all the way full. The C total is going to be 60, but it's not full all the way, right? It's only full up to halfway, so that's 30. which means that this is really 40 over 60. I can think about those zeros as just being gone then, and this reduces down to 2/3. D is going to be the correct answer here. All right, so we've seen a number of different types of solution methods that you can use for fraction, decimal, percent, and ratio problems. The first one that we looked at really was looking at rewriting the ratio and thinking about what that meant. The next one we looked at had to do with estimating. Then we looked at smart numbers. Now we're looking at a problem in which we use this kind of smart numbers, but also drawing it out approach. And that isn't all, right? There are many other ways that you can go about these problems successfully and quickly and efficiently. What I would like for you to take away from this, though, is this idea that content is important and you do have to understand the basics. You have to know how fractions work. You have to know how ratios work. Once you do understand that, though, you need to build on top of that. You need to say, I have to follow a good process, and I have to be looking for solution methods that make sense in context. Not every fractions problem can be solved in the same way. We just proved that, right? Nor should every ratios problem be solved in the same way. So when you're looking at problems, you want to let the information in the problem be your guide as to what you're going to do to solve that problem. You're looking for context clues like, how is the question worded? What kind of a question is it? What do the answer choices look like? Are they relationships? If they are, and there are no real numbers defined, then you can use smart numbers like we just did. If they're far apart, then maybe you can do some estimating. You're looking for context clues, and not only is the question full of context clues, but the answer choices as well help you with that. So for this last problem here that we just completed, what do you think was the biggest challenge on this problem? Was it content, was it process, or was it solution method? C, P, or S? Yeah, just need to take my time. I really like that comment, actually. What I notice sometimes for my students is that they will try to move really quickly, and by moving quickly, they actually end up taking more time. One classic example I can think of in doing that is looking at a problem like this, that's a word problem, reading it very quickly, for example, and having to read it several times. I almost never read a problem multiple times. Sometimes I will give it a second read through, or at least pieces of it a second read through, but more often I'm reading it really slowly one time and pausing to say, like, bucket A has twice the capacity of bucket B. Okay, what does that mean? And then I'm starting to draw. I'm not getting all the way through it and then having to reread multiple times, because that actually takes more time in the end. Excellent. As you go forward, please do think about this review framework, you can call it that, I suppose, and ask yourself, are you truly having content problems? Or if you're struggling with something like FDPR, is it your process really that's suffering? Especially when you take a CAT, this can be very helpful because you can see trends throughout your CAT. What did you struggle on? Many people tend to struggle with FDPR. It's not always about the content, though. FDPR in particular has many different solution methods that are often applicable, like estimating, smart numbers, and working backwards. And if you're missing out on those, it can look like a content problem, but really be a process or solution method problem. All right. I'm going to have one more slide that we'll take a look at before we go. I do have an upcoming course. The first session is tomorrow. You can sign up for the entire course, but that's actually the link where you can sign up for the entire course if you're interested. But here is another link. You actually can sign up for just the first session as a free trial. This first session is really focused on data sufficiency and how you go about data sufficiency. So looking at process and making sure that you're successful in that type of problem in the quant section. We'll also talk a little bit about the structure of the GMAT and how it works, which is extremely important and valuable information, because if you, as I said at the beginning, if you're approaching the GMAT like it's any other test, then you're probably approaching it in a way that's not going to work out well for you. You have to understand how the GMAT is different from other exams in order to be successful. So if you're not doing anything tomorrow evening, please feel free to join me and several others as we talk about data sufficiency. All right, does anyone have questions before we head out for tonight? Oh, I appreciate you coming for tonight's lesson. Thank you. Excellent. Well, it looks like nobody has questions. Will we have a free prep hour on geometry, right? As I said that. Yeah, absolutely. We can have a free prep hour on geometry. I am teaching another free prep hour coming up in a few weeks, I think. So I can certainly look to make that one about geometry if that's something that you are interested in. Any particular questions or aspects of geometry that you're interested in learning more about? Just in general, okay. Excellent. Geometry is interesting because there are some very concrete and specific rules that you need to memorize and understand. But beyond that, there's a lot of pattern recognition. So once you memorize the specific rules for circles and squares and triangles, for example, after that, it's more about recognizing specific patterns. Yeah, there are too many formulas. It's a good idea to make some of those formulas into flashcards, right? And make sure that you understand what all of them are for. That's really the only area in the GMAT, I think, in the quant section that you need to do a lot of memorizing. You have to make sure that you understand circles, squares, and triangles in particular, that you can calculate area for each of them, and that you understand some other basic rules about them. All right. Well, I will take a look at scheduling some geometry practice coming up here. I hope that all of you have a wonderful evening. And as you go forward, please continue to make use of the free GMAT prep hours and other free prep resources, because I teach a lot of them and I love to have people show up. All right. Everyone have a great evening. Happy studying.